orgasmic enlightenment, where the sexual and spiritual come together. I'm Kim Anami, and I'm a holistic sex and relationship coach and a vaginal weightlifter. In this show, we explore all things intimate. I believe that our sexual energy is life force, creative energy, and we can use it to shape our worlds, strengthen our relationships, and self-actualize. I blend the most avant-garde information from neuroscience, ancient sexual practices like Tantra and Taoism, to renegade wellness modalities to show you how to create gourmet sex in your lives. Come one, come all. Sex dates make cash. If your sex dates aren't making you rich, what are you even doing? If your orgasms aren't changing your life, are you even having sex? In Anami Land, your sex dates become sacred, set in stone, non-negotiable parts of your life because you know the benefits they bring. They are your sanctuary, refueling station, anti-depressant and anti-anxiety pill, creative inspiration, and cash generators all at once. There is no better all-in-one panacea. Many people find my work because they've been given some kind of prognosis or death sentence in the medical industry, and they just don't buy it. They think there has to be a better way. Surely the only answer is not to remove one's organs or to be on drugs and hormones for the rest of your life. Intuitively, it just doesn't sit right with them. And they're right. It isn't the only answer, and frankly, it isn't even an answer. It is a multi-level marketing scam. Here, take out your uterus and you'll need our synthetic hormones for the next 50 years. No, fuck off. No deal. So people turn away from the allopathic world, or at the very least, they have some fragment of hope there could possibly be a different solution. And then they find me. And I'm here telling them menopause is a scam. Every woman is multi-orgasmic, has a ravenous libido, and can ejaculate across the room. Every man can last for hours at a time and orgasm without ejaculation. Periods and menopause can be blissful. Men can be having erections into their 90s and fucking up a storm. Birth was meant to be the biggest orgasm of your life. And God wants you to have lots of sex. And they're half like, what the fuck? And the other half of them are, sign me the fuck up, take my money. I often say that menopausal women are the cash cow of allopathic medicine. All the options they're presented with are atrocious. Drugs and hormones for life, sacrificial organ removal, vaginal electrocution, cut off your labia to spite your vagina. It is insane, but not in Anami Land. I would rather drive you insane with orgasmic pleasure. In Anami Land, women are learning to harness their sexual energy and leverage it into their lives rather than having it invert on them. If you've been listening to my podcasts for any length of time, you will know that a common truism around these parts is that sexual energy is creative energy. It's the energy that creates new life. If we aren't creating babies with it, then we can be using it to consciously heal and rejuvenate ourselves and our partners, and to manifest our goals and visions in life. Procreative energy. When we don't use our sexual energy this way, it inverts back upon us, and people suffer all manner of ailments from difficult periods and menopause, PMS, cysts, growth, low libido, C-word things, erectile issues, and the list goes on. When we do use our sexual energy as the tangible turbo fuel it was always meant to be, everyone benefits. That energy shows up as literal cash, abundance, and opportunities. It shows up as life-changing, ecstatic orgasms. It shows up as creative inspiration and brilliance. It shows up as our marriages having the best sex ever. And then, no, that was the best sex ever. No, wait, that was the best sex ever. And you keep out fucking yourselves every time. Regular sex dates are a way of life in Anami Land. The typical prescription from Dr. Anami is a weekly 3-hour sex date and a minimum of 2 shorter ones elsewhere during the week. And to be clear, we define shorter as an hour. If you have sex every day, as many of our Anami well-fucked all-stars do, then even better. Once you realize that if you're feeling tired or sad or overweight or broke, the best remedy is to orgasm your way out of it, then you never go back. Because you see how your sexual energy impacts every part of your life, because it is the energy of creating new life. So if you need to inject life and vim into any element of your existence, get to bed. The longer the sex date, the more of this vital energy you cultivate and have available to channel into your life, self, and projects. Life-changing sex is not happening in a 10-minute pump, dump, and schlump session. It is happening in extended scenarios where you have time to fully open up to each other and to reach these deep places of surrender and connection where you tap into the flow of the universe. That is the true purpose of sex. In today's Well Fucked All-Star interview, we are speaking with Maureen. She shares about an epic sex date that led monumentally to increasing their income, as well as defying the menopause stereotypes and programming, and growing up in the Bible Belt and reconciling being a voraciously sexual woman with her spiritual path. And we talk about the power of your own healing extending into your family and your children. Well Fucked All-Stars! Hello, Maureen. I'm so excited for you to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
The moment I saw you, I could see the unmistakable glow of the well-fucked woman.
Yes, it works.
Okay, well, tell us exactly how it has been working for you.
Yes. So, I guess I've been on a healing, reconstruction, deconstruction journey for 8 years now, and one of my friends who's been on that journey with me is our homeopathic lady, and she had mentioned your work, and it was last spring, so 2023, because I thought I was going through perimenopause and I wanted to get her opinion. She's like, well, I've been listening to this lady, Kim Anami, and so I burned through all of your stuff. And I was like, this is the best. And decided I was going to sign up for for Well Fucked Woman. That was in the summer. So we go on a RV trip every year, like 4 to 6 weeks when the girls are out of school, and we just go out west. So this time we went to Canada, and it was magical. And I'm doing your lessons in the back, sliding the door closed. And then I'm like, oh, can't wait for tonight. I get to practice everything.
Wait, so you're traveling in, like, did you say a van or a motorhome or what?
Yeah,
an RV, motorhome. Right? An RV. Okay, got it.
Yeah, the one with like the bunk over the top of the bed, and
sure, yeah.
So that blew my mind wide open. I mean, not only so week 1, and you're like, let's first talk about our blocks, and I was like, get to the good stuff, woman. I want to have an orgasm every time. I want to be across the room. I mean, like everything.
And so let me back up for one moment. Yeah. So when you first got introduced to the work, you mentioned you were at the cusp of what people refer to as menopause. Was that one of the entry points for you? Was like something connected to that your homeopath was like? Because I, as you know, have a very different viewpoint about all things menopause and perimenopause and all of that stuff that's so much different than the mainstream.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I didn't want to do hormone replacement therapy because I knew, I've been on this healing whole journey. I was like, that's not for me. But I knew there was a different mindset and a different way to approach it rather than just be like, bleh. your body. And so those were the podcasts I started listening to. And then I listened to all the menopause ones and I was like, what's next?
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So that was like restoring some inspiration for what might be possible outside of the norm.
Yes.
That it sounds like, and you, like many people, have a sense like, okay, I don't want to go this path. The idea that I'm meant to take hormones for the rest of my life sounds kind of fucking ridiculous.
It is.
And what else is there? Except you don't really know because it's not widely talked about. The dominant narrative is the only way to survive the next 50 years is for you to be medicated and maybe give up some organs on the way.
Yes. And that a woman's body is past your prime and there's just basically nothing else left for you to offer to the world. And I had 3 girls and I lost my mom when I was 4. And so I did not have a maternal figurehead I have wonderful aunts who did their best. I love them to the end and a great single dad. But there was still this mother, daughter, Mother Earth, daughter. There's a spiritual connection that I was like, I'm missing a piece of this. And so when you started talking about how your body and your spirit, it's all starts to be combined and sex. And I was like, it blew me up.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
All right. So you're getting into WFW. I start talking about some of the inner work that needs to happen, and you're feeling a little impatient. Like, what about my G-spot?
Yes. I was like, skip ahead. I didn't. I listened to it. But come to find out, you got to do the block work. You got to start finding all these blocks. And so my husband would be driving, and I'm like listening to the podcast or watching the video like this. So I'm like trying to watch it. And then I'm trying to write it down. So I'm speaking to my friend. I'm like, I think my block came from when I was like 13. And like trying to be super secretive, but it's just changing my life. So after working through the blocks, then you start to get to like surrender and open. I'm like, just get to the G spot. Changed my life. Surrendering and opening. And it's something that I've talked to all my friends about. I'm like, you guys, first of all, you're not having great sex because you're not surrendering to your husband or your person and God and yourself and the universe and your beautiful body. And they're like, that's so juju. And then opening, I'm like, of course it's hard to have sex when you're like all the time. And so that starts changing my life. And then you finally got to the good stuff, but we couldn't get to the good stuff without getting to the first stuff. So
right. And that's the funny part is like, if having, let's say, a G-spot orgasm was all about doing the 2-finger come hither motion, everybody would be having them, right? Because you can find that information in any random internet article or video, but no one, most people still aren't having them. So clearly that's not the only factor in the equation. I often say that mechanics is about, anywhere from 10, maybe in some cases 20% of what's important, but everything else that you've already mentioned, like clearing your blockages, places where you're stuck, learning how to really open up and surrender and get into a vulnerable state are all the keys to the queendom. And then a 2-finger technique is always handy, but like that's not the entryway, that's only a small part of it.
It is. And even when you started wrapping in, and this is why I was like super interested in Kim, because it wasn't just, well, here's a great way that Cosmopolitan says to have sex. Like you started digging deep into 1,000-year-old history of it and the why behind it and the cultures and practices that have been here long before us. And it blew my mind. And I started to feel like this is kind of a part of womanhood that I had been missing. And that was one of my blocks. Your mom dies when you're 4. You feel a little bit, like a ship in the dark sometimes when it relates to connecting with the female power and the ancient practices of womanhood and what you're going to do for the next generation. And so that really helped plug me into a feeling that, oh my God, I'm part of this enormous ocean of women, and I'll give what I can to my girls, and then the wave recedes, and then I'm back into the history of the world. But while I'm here, I'm going to bring it all in. I'm going to teach you tantric wisdom and what they used to say. I mean, the conversations I had with my husband after starting to unpack all this, it was perfect. Fireside chat with wine, and the girls are all in bed, and I'm like, babe, get this. And his mind was blown.
So you would just, the way you described it is that you had an intimate, good relationship for 21 years of your marriage. And then you found this work, and then you had one of these epic sex states that we talk about where I say, if sex doesn't change your life, then you're doing it wrong. So tell us about this sex state in particular.
Well, to back up, one of our RV road trip dates was so fun. And we had gone to a winery. I know you don't like it, but we love the winery. And it was so fun. We come home, and I had been doing your work about surrendering and opening. And part of it I realized was me feeling like, do I still look pregnant if I go like this? Like bulge my belly out. And I was just a little embarrassed by it, but, not like body shaming myself. So that night I told Tim, I was like, babe, look what I can do. And I like bulged my tummy out like I was pregnant, almost expecting him to be like, ew, that's gross. He goes, oh yeah, look at my belly. And like he bulged it out even more. And that opening, that tiny little opening in surrender, one of the best sex dates we had in our RV, hands down. And it's so funny because that's where it started. And then it just felt like it kept climbing. So school year, I was like, I'm going to sign up for VKF. And so started doing a whole different kind of work. And for VKF, for me, started connecting the manifesting part you talk about. And all the visualizations you include, oh my gosh, they're like my mantra, going deep in the uterine healing. And so I really embraced this segment of the journey. And of course, I'm always like health and happiness for my kids, love. And then I was like, maybe the money thing. And my husband makes great money. We're grateful for that. And he works hard, and we've had this business for 20 years. And we started it when we were like 22, or they were babies. We were babies. And so that just has never really been something I wanted to manifest, because I was like, we have enough. I don't need to like scrape it in. But that was such a scarcity mindset, which you were like, girl, there's enough to go around. So we had this epic date. And in my brain, I'm like, this is it. And I did the manifesting money practice, the whole thing of it. And afterwards, not only was it like the best sex ever, I ran to my computer and I'm like, I've got this idea. I started hammering out this idea. We got to bed after hours of like being on this high. And the next day, my husband gets a phone call, and it's from some, I don't know, adjuster from COVID. He's like, you and your company could be, we could do this thing for $300,000. Could be, I don't know, get it or whatever.
Eligible for some kind of.
That's the word I was trying to think of, eligible. So the very next day, I was like, oh my God, it works. The money manifesting sex thing. And it ended up, he wasn't. Go ahead.
What do you think was different about that sex date? Were there particular orgasms you were having? Did you find that you were just able to go deeper into surrender? Like, what would you say was different that would lead you to think it works? Like, you were obviously doing the visualizations and had much more awareness of the sexual energy being channeled into abundance and actual cash.
Well, I had been doing the work for months and months, and it just felt like a steady ramp. Like every sex state we'd start having, it would just get better and better and better and better. So not only like have been doing the work for a while, lengthening every time we had this epic sex date, we'd be able to go longer. So you're always like, how long did you really have sex for? I don't think you did it. So it was very long. And we, it wasn't just clitoral orgasm, one and done. It was do that one, then we go to the next one, and then we go from there and we go to and we pound town, and we pound it away until it all
Pound town cervical orgasm destination.
It is. And it's literally the work that you teach. You keep on going. You do it. You work, unblock the blocks. And that one, coupled with this purposeful, intentional, spiritual practice, it just was like fireworks.
So you've talked about also, I talk about surrender to the self and partner and to God and the universe, whatever people like to define that as. And you've mentioned that a few times, like that these experiences have helped bring you closer to God, or you even have felt that in the moment. So tell us more about that, because that can be, I totally get that, and I speak about that all the time. But for some people, sex and God are two polar opposites that never meet unless in a very bad way. So what does that mean to you to have those things connected and even for them to amplify one another?
Yes. Well, lots. So I said to you that the $300,000 deal didn't transpire. And I was like, well, that kind of stinks. I thought it worked. Come to find out, I had to have my husband get your income tax thing and tell me the numbers. So from 2023 is when we started that summer. So from 2023, that summer, to 2024, this summer, he got a 45% increase in his income. All the other years that we've been doing this, 20 years, it's about 15 to 20% increase. Literally from last summer to this summer, 45% increase in pay. And then from this summer, we were like, wonder what from this summer to next summer, we sat there and we calculated 55% increase in pay. And so that I was like, I guess I'll take that over $300,000. So thank you, God and universe and Kim. We did it.
Okay, so, and then how does that relate to your trust and connection in God and your whatever that is for you?
Yes. I keep using the word blown, and it is sexually, physically, emotionally, spiritually, everything. Blows the top off. So, I live in the South, in Georgia, and from the 80s, and it was a very purity culture in the South, and religion. And
so purity means you can't have vaginal sex, but anal sex is okay, because that's not really
right. Right. There was so much trauma.
And what were you going to say about sex and God? You made a little hand gesture there. And what were you going to say before I had to get in my point about anal?
That sex and femininity and God were polar opposites. That's what we grew up, the purity culture. You could never have one with the other. It was so toxic. And it is something that, if you were born in the 80s and you grew up in the South or in a evangelical church, that is the message we received over and over and over. And so God had nothing to do with sex. And then you're supposed to remain pure, not have sex until you get married. And my husband and I did, within a centimeter of our vagina and penis. But we were like, it wasn't sex, right? And so we made it. Got married real fast. First of our friends who we wanted to have sex. 21. But nobody teaches you how to do it. So I was supposed to go from super pure and not talk about things like that to wild orgasm in the bed. Nobody our church groups never taught us how to have good sex. I didn't have a mom. Most of the moms, 100% of my friends, their mom's sex talk was read this book. Or it was they came in their birth control on the bed. So to be able to turn it on did not work. So for my first 13 years of marriage, I did not have an orgasm. And I would get real close and I'd be like, no, I don't think that was it. And so my friend was like, you should try a vibrator. I know you're against vibrators. I don't need a vibrator because I have a great husband who's got a big penis. So that was kind of a good entry. But however, it was still very just physical, and then spiritual and emotional kind of was separate. Like you knew, like, oh, I got to be feeling him if we want to have sex. But the spiritual part definitely was not even a part of the equation until your work. So that's when it's almost like you gave permission for me and for other women to invite God into the equation, however you see God. At least think this very act is probably more spiritual than any of y'all fools are thinking. Like you just started giving permission for that. And so it was like I just opened a door, and the very act of surrendering your physical body and your emotions to your husband, and then to the spirit, and then to yourself. I mean, I was like down the rabbit hole with spirituality. Opening up, giving permission for my husband to be masculine, for me to be feminine, and that God was like, I don't care about all that stuff. So it really opened the door to how spirituality is connected to sex. So
So when you say like God says, I don't care about all that stuff, in the sense of like not judging, you mean, or what do you mean by that? Right?
not judging. Yes.
Yeah. Like God's not up there judging people for how short their skirts are or how many orgasms they're having.
No.
God's got better things to do. Yeah.
Right. He's not there like, BDSM, that's a mortal sin, -10 points.
Right.
And especially when you get to this place where you're like, I can hear God better now. He leads, and guys, I can hear it is like my third eye, everything has opened spiritually.
So I love that. I can hear God better now. So tell me more about that. And in light of, like, would you say that's connection to this deeper level of surrender? You mentioned tapping into your feminine energy. Like, how do you see that blossoming into, I can hear God better now? Because that, to me, is one of the ultimate goals of life. Like, how can I hear God better?
Oh my gosh, how can you? Well, it goes to clearing the pathways, doing your block work, surrendering to deeper things. When you have trauma when you're a kid, your safety and security is compromised. And if you don't do that healing work, that is the very first chakra. And if you don't get those all lined up from there, of course, it's hard to see and hear God, because by this time on the stage, it's already off kilter. So doing that work, I felt like was like a laser focus. And it just was like a shifting spiritually, so that then we're like, oh my gosh, it's clear again. So even that work.
Right. And you talked about like this all helped you to unblock 36 years worth of trauma and emotional stuff. So, and would I always talk about sexuality as being this catalyst and this alchemizer. And if you're doing this deeper work to excavate and to release trauma, it's like the grain of sand in the pearl. Those things become, then they metamorphosize into a pearl, right? A thing of beauty and wisdom.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And even the ramp of sex, like, of course, when I started your week 1 of Well Fucked Woman, I was like, today I'm going to go from great sex to like, I'm in another universe. And it didn't happen like that for me. And I know it does for some women. But to see that slow ramp up where my hard work and our hard work led to greater and greater and greater sex. And now we're like, that was the best sex. And then the next week, we're like, no, that was the best sex. And so I do think it's like that pearl analogy. Just this tiny little thing that over time, you're doing the work, becomes this beautiful pearl.
Right. Yeah. And what about your creativity? You mentioned like what I often do is after a sex date, go running to my laptop or running to some paper and pen to write down these new inspired ideas. what happened? You mentioned that there was an experience for you of something like that.
Yes. So I love that you even just shared that, because I mean, grow up with all the things, and you never even equate creativity to sex. It's just the thing. And so I was like, I'll be open for it. And after that date, I had for years, I love writing. And so literally, we had that great sex. And I was like, that was amazing. And I was like, it was just like light bulb, like all these things started connecting, like my neurons were connecting. And I ran to my computer, and for hours I hammered it out, and it was all making sense. It was literally like I had made a connection with semen in my brain.
I love that. I love that. So what was there anything else you can think of that was then seemed to be manifested out of these epic sex dates or your ever evolving sexual connection that you could see? It's like, oh, this is a tangible result of our up-leveling our lovemaking.
Well, to be very vulnerable, during your phone calls where you would interview other women, and then when we'd all be kind of put into the Zoom calls together, I had never heard so many stories, just women's sexual stories. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So many people have so many different journeys. Obviously, I knew that. But to start connecting, when you would say, it sounds like trauma happened, sexual trauma happened. And then when you would do some deeper studies during, I don't know, the courses on if you've had sexual trauma, this is a good thing for you. And then I started seeing some patterns that I thought, gosh, one of my daughters I knew something had happened to her when she was 3. And I knew in my brain, the body's going to keep the score of that, it was just a molestation. And not just, that's what it was. So ramping up to that, I knew we'd probably have to circle back in a different way than we had been doing for these many years. And then as we started interviewing women, I mean, people would talk, and the sexual trauma that was not healed manifests itself when the women are 40, 50, 60, 20. And I thought, I'm not going to let that happen to my girl. But we started some talk therapy to kind of ramp up to her being okay and open to thinking maybe the things that are manifesting now as a teenager is a result of this thing, and that's okay. And let's just do some healing on it. And whatever the result is after and continuing on, hey, we're doing the best we can do around here, and it's okay. And for me as a mom to hear stories of women who walk through that, and that it doesn't ruin their life, and that they can just have meaningful sexual relationships, gave me a lot of hope. So thanks.
Yeah, that's great. Lovely that you're going to help facilitate that healing, and address it, because a lot of people, I think, that even if it didn't happen to them, but it's happened to someone in their family or their children, have this urge to check out and dissociate and try to bury it, and throw it away.
Yeah, so I can really, walking through my daughter, just kind of realizing she doesn't really remember, but her body is keeping the score. And she'd say things that I was like, yeah, even masculinity and femininity. It was hard for her to embrace that feminine nature, because in her brain, she thought, she equated it to being a victim.
Right.
So we had to do a lot of work to rewrite what femininity looks like in a safe place. So yeah, it's big work on all the levels.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to share that happened to you in terms of realizations, breakthroughs, changes, both in your sex life or your outer life?
I would be like scrolling like this if I read it all to you. So many things. I mean, I guess just recently, I'll tell you, but I think I didn't give myself enough credit as a wife, especially like I don't work, you know what I mean? I take care of the kids. I have like a million side hustles, but it's not like I'm bringing on big money. And we always joke, you know, people will say, I don't know if you've heard this, like if you just keep his balls empty and his belly full, you know,
I've
oh,
got that
like,
expression. Yeah.
yeah. Like, I'm so great at that. I'm a trophy wife at that. But I guess I just didn't give myself a ton of credit for then almost the manifestation that comes through my husband to the world. And when you kept saying things like that we bring our spouses home to God, women often bring their men home to God. I mean, it makes me think of histories of women and spiritual cultures and, you know, even like you'll see an archaeological tablet and it's this naked woman, you know, but there is so much power in women's sexuality. And it's like a laser sometimes through your spouse. So in thinking through that, I just started being like, oh my gosh, yeah, girl, yeah, I'm part of this power shooting through you, through my vagina, through you. And literally just the other week, my husband's CFO said to him, his name's Tim, she goes, Tim, you are the hunter around here. You know, there's 15 employees. Tim, you are the hunter around here. All the rest of us are farmers. So she was like, I need you to lead this thing. And I thought, what a masculine thing to recognize about your husband. Like, you're the hunter. The rest of us can't even match your hunter energy. And I mean, he grew 10 inches tall and boop that day.
So that's a very tangible benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be pretty happy with that benefit. Absolutely.
I know.
Yeah. Congrats.
And so
Well
many
done.
things. You just
What
are
else?
doing-
Tell me.
Oh, surrender. Surrender is such a big one. Because, like I said, you know, spirituality, all these things. Part of the spirituality lessons we kind of, yeah, I could say indoctrinated. And that's why me, myself, tons of people are doing this deconstruction religion-wise and then reconstruction. Because you kind of look back and you're like, oh, no, wow, like, and you can bleep this following sentence out if you want. Trump supporters. I'm like, how are you not seeing how your view of the world, your filter of the world is so destructive? But I grew up in it. We grew up in it, a lot of us. And part of it is that the only person you surrender to is God. And he's always in control. And so you always had this God in control, you know, manifested in these leaders that are like, I'm in control. You don't have any rights, or you can't make a decision for yourself. So that's kind of the way you kind of equate God to. He's in control, surrender to him. So I heard this quote literally just, I don't know, 4 days ago. It says, to the extent we can live surrendered is the extent we can live untamed. To the extent we can live surrendered is the extent we can live untamed. And surrender, being an untamed woman out wild and free and like creative and breaking through these barriers and all these things, is because you can surrender to all of it, not just God, that situation and yourself and your friend's idea and your massage therapist who's like, just relax, surrender to that shit. You're about to get a great massage. So the extent we can live surrendered is the extent we can live untamed. And I mean, it's a mind blower. Women, surrender to all of it. This message brought to you by a former Southern Baptist.
Wow, I love that expression, and I haven't heard it quite expressed like that before, but I fully agree. I mean, that's the whole theme that runs through the Well-Fucked Woman. This is how you surrender. And it's such a almost amorphous concept, but because it's so multi-layered, right, in all facets of our lives. But when you really start to, and it's not an easy thing to do, and it's contrary to a lot of how we're taught to live in terms of like taking control, getting things done, rather than defaulting to surrender, to open, and then to let some kind of energy come through you, right? A larger force, whether that is God or cock or a strong masculine energy, right? That is something that we can then tap into, and that it informs us and guides us and brings us into places that we couldn't even imagine for ourselves. But it all comes with the price of admission, which is surrender.
Yeah. I mean, even the concept of surrendering to this present moment. Like every Buddhist monk will be like, that's your practice. Eckhart Tolle, do it. Surrender to this present moment. And even when you're in sex, you can't be in this present moment. Good luck having great sex.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Anything else you'd like to share?
Oh, okay. Oh, and here's another one. Okay. Control. So when you did the BDSM talk in Wealth Up Woman, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know there was anything good about it. And I just thought in like the movie, the 50 Shades of Grey, and you
didn't know there was anything more deeper and spiritual about it, because the way it's often portrayed is more superficial. It's kinky, or, it might be a bit of a turn on, but there's not really any depth or, deeper meaning. Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And so to allow myself to just dive into that and think, well, why does that make you uncomfortable, and working through the blocks and all that stuff. So it really made me think, oh, I like to have control. Who doesn't? What woman, what mom doesn't like to have control? So when I'm raising my babies up until they're like 10, 11, 12, you have control. You drive them places. You tell them what to eat for lunch. Or here's how you make a sandwich or whatever. But then teenagers, that does not work the same way. And even when I say you have control, it doesn't mean I'm bossing them around, but there's more, oversight. And then as they become teenagers, it's like you are pushing them away from, into the center of the pool. Like, how to swim, you got this.
Yeah.
And for a mom, it feels like I'm losing control. And through the BDSM work that you presented, I was like, oh, that is the practice of giving up control. And I swear to you, it's easier for me to give up my control and be like, my teenagers, oh, you want to drive there and pick that person up and go do that and hang out there for hours, and okay, well, here's $20. You know what to do. And it makes it easier because you've already done the work of control. And so here's a cool quote. It says, anytime you bring control into a relationship, you lose access to intimacy. Anytime you bring control into a relationship, you lose access to intimacy. And the control of, you got to do this, you got to do that. And it's different when you say, I'm in control of my car, I can drive it. And then you say, I'm in control of my wife or kids or my husband, that feels so different. So the practice of just letting go of that control, sex helps.
It's one of the best workshops there really is, and places to flex that muscle, because it's so powerful. And it's like, this is where I liken sex to psychedelics, right? People are really big into these conscious drug, plant medicine journeys these days. And I'm like, well, but you can actually get that through your own body for free on tap with your own energy, where you are, right, where it's like your own specific medicine.
Yeah.
Because the pathway that you have to go through and the energetics of that surrender and leaping into the abyss that you go through to attain the higher dimension cervical orgasms for women, and men have their own version of that, that, that the price of it, that's the doorway. Like that's the doorway of perception into these altered states of consciousness and altered versions of yourself, where you're then stripping away the little self and the parts of you that stand in the way of accessing this much deeper, stronger, wiser, divine part of us that has intuition and wisdom and guidance and propels us out into our lives.
I mean, it's mind-boggling. And even the healing part of yourself. I just continue to think like the connecting of like dendrites and neurons in my mind creatively, and in your body, things that are broken or don't quite work well. Like there's such power in and sex and purposeful intuition about your body and
the magic healer, the magic bullet. Yeah. Your own medicine.
Your own magic bullet. You are the magic bullet.
Amazing. Is there anything else you can think of?
Well, okay. So here's a question I don't quite understand yet. This may be off topic, but can you just go through real quick, like what does each chakra do sexually? Like how is it connected sexually?
Well, I mean, they consider the second chakra to be the chakra of sexuality, creativity, money. And then, that energy in my work is about lifting that energy up and channeling it into higher ways, like bringing it up to the heart, up to the spiritual centers. And I think for most people in our culture, the default is that energy remains at a lower state, a more coarse base, like, for example, pornography versus like jerking off to porn versus having Anami style, change your life, gourmet sex that brings you closer to God, right? So, one way is the most, and no judgment, it's just that one way is a more base, just dumping out of energy, stress relief, help you to fall asleep. The other one is how do we actually expand our consciousness and become the best versions of ourselves rather than feel embarrassed and ashamed and crumple up our fluids into a piece of toilet paper and throw them away, So those are the differences of like elevating that energy as high up as we can, right? So that's the essence of my work, is to combine that energy with the higher parts of ourselves. So we elevate the entire sexual experience, and it becomes like in these ancient cultures, in Tantra and Taoism, that's what they used our sexual energy for, was to be a springboard into higher states of consciousness and enlightenment. That's what all these practices were about, was they recognized that, yes, we could have a more base experience of sexuality and just dump that energy out and use it in an ultra, lustful way. Or we can take that energy to catapult ourselves into higher dimensions of consciousness. Yeah. So that's what I'm fascinated by. That's what I'm all about. Anyone can jerk off and bust out an orgasm and pass out. Who cares, right? But I'm more interested in, great, how do I get to know myself better? How do I self-realize? And how does that even help me to connect to God?
But it really makes me think there's something so spiritual and sexual and higher dimension that you can access.
Well, this is the great psyop around sexuality, right? Is that we're told that sexuality, like in the dominant religions and the dominant narrative of the culture, that sex and God are disconnected. And actually, like, God doesn't like sex very much, or God's kind of opposed to sex. Maybe in certain conditions, it's okay. So people have such a confusion that, if they do have a spiritual side that they're aware of, I think we all have that, but they're more connected to their spiritual selves. And I think they know intuitively that they do connect naturally, right? Like this energy of surrender sexually, and you're opening awareness to spirituality, like through higher consciousness, that's a natural flow. But then because there's so much damnation and judgment and taboo around it, they shut that off, they block it off. But then they also can feel like somehow that's not right. And they almost know that there's a deeper experience of sexuality to be had. And then they find my work or something similar to it that actually makes these connections between sex and God, that sexuality is a really sacred act if we designate it to be one. And then something in them wakes up to be like, yeah, I knew that. I felt that. Intuitively felt that all along. I just didn't really have the language for it because no one's ever let me have, like, no one's ever spoken about it that way. It's been the opposite. Right. Yeah. And so I say it's the most successful psyop that ever was, where we all have this powerful energy literally at our fingertips. And yet for all of the damnation and judgment and taboo and restriction and misinformation and outright lies, it could be a million miles away for how much access people actually have to their own energy flow in their own bodies. That's the most successful psyop ever.
And there's a great movement of us who are peeling that off,
Yeah, amazing. So, any closing words you'd like to share?
Just that I'm so grateful from the bottom of my heart for the work that you have done, Kim. And I just bless everything you put your hands to, that it would explode with health and prosperity and love and joy, and that this work gets to every woman everywhere, and it just can change the world. So thank you for that.
My pleasure. Thank you.
The Well Fucked Woman Salon is coming soon. This was the program that changed everything for Maureen. In the meantime, check out my free 7-day bombshell boot camp. Increase your sexual magnetism, orgasm potential, and unfuckwithable factor. If you want to become multi-orgasmic, have an off-the-charts libido, get rich, experience pleasurable periods, PMS, and menopause, have deeply intimate relationships, set your creativity on fire, lose weight and love your body, be wet all of the time, even when menopausal, become a man magnet, and own your beauty and confidence, and you don't give a fuck what anyone thinks of you because you can never be too much. Then come and check out the Bombshell Bootcamp. Go to kimanami.com, look for Sexual Savant Salons, and then click on How to Be a Well-Fucked Woman to sign up. Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, subscribe and also leave a review. And send someone else the gift of a healthy libido and an off-the-charts love life by sharing this episode with them. We'll be back next week, and in the meantime, many happy orgasms.